definitely this is a pretty good model for the money, and it's some of the little points there, the little attentions to detail, which really do make this model come alive when you know the differences between the locomotives throughout their lives. The fact that Bachmann have made it possible with this tooling just to get some of the subtle detail differences, really quite nice. The B1 is definitely one to consider adding to your collection at the current price point. Well, hello there! It is really amazing to see you, and I really do hope that you are well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to Weir Yard in the Loft, and today we're back on the bargain hunt, going and hunting out just what is available. And it does seem like there are so many sales on at the moment, which is really great. And I've seen stuff in N gauge, 009, 00, and even O gauge as well. There's some amazing deals out there. But if you remember, I did do a review a little while ago on the Midland compound from TMC, the model centre, and that went down really well, and I couldn't help but notice that they've still got some of those. So if you missed out on those, don't delay, but they are still there. We've got a link down below to TMC, the model centre, but there's another model which caught my eye in their sale, and that is the B1 from Bachmann. Now, this is an older model, but it still has a lot of life left to give, and more so because it got quite a significant upgrade a little while ago. So it's a lot better than the original B1, which I got probably about 25 years ago, which was split chassis and had to go when I went DCC. So this sale at TMC gives a really good opportunity to stock up on B1s that are DCC ready with an all-new chassis, and TMC were very kind to send over a couple of loaners for review to the channel for us to take a good close look at what they've got available. So today we're going to be taking a look at the B1s from Bachmann in the TMC sale at I think they're about 35% off, which does bring the RRP down to really quite an attractive level. So come with me and let's take a closer look at how these models square up, and are they really worth getting for your collection. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest loco.
It's always good to go on a bit of a bargain crawl, and these Bachmann B1 class locomotives have caught my eye. They're in the Model Centre, TMC, the Model Centre's sale, and they're about 35% off the RRP, and it actually does bring them down to quite a keen price. So they're in the sale at the moment, and there's two different liveries that really did catch my eye. The weathered BR Lake Crest, and then also the LNER Doncaster Green, which is a really eye-catching livery. I do quite like locomotives in that, and in my fleet I've got I think I've got a D16, a B12, a P2, and possibly a couple of others as well. It is definitely a livery that is growing on me. But of course you can't overlook the BR livery, and this is a factory weathered example as well. Now I think a lot of people think of the B1 in terms of the older model that had a split chassis, but these are not that model, and I guess a lot of people perhaps haven't realised that at the point that these models got DCC compatibility, it is actually an all-new chassis that's on them. So there's nothing mechanically to do with those original split chassis versions. And I think perhaps that's one of the reasons that these have ended up in the sales. Let's start with the BR Weathered Black. So we've got a catalogue number on here of 31-716A, and this is number 61076, BR Lined Black Late Crest, factory weathered, and you can see it's an 8-pin DCC socket that these have, and it's actually in the locomotive from the slightly earlier DCC ready Bachmann locomotives. The steam outline locomotives tended to have the 8-pin socket in the locomotive, and then later on some of the models got upgraded to a 21-pin in the tender, but the B1 for whatever reason is still on that earlier iteration. We do get a good class history here, and the B1 was actually the second locomotive to have that designation. It was a Thompson design during the tenure of the LNER, an equivalent to probably about the GW Hall class or the Stanier Black 5. So very versatile machines, introduced in 1942. Some of them actually had various names. So Springbok was the first one, named in honour of a visit by Jan Smuts, the South African Prime Minister of the day, and certainly as well Roe Deer is another one that I'm familiar with the name of. They were actually unofficially known as bongos after 8306 bongo, with a number of the other engines being unnamed. 18 of them carried names of LNER directors, and also 61379 Mayflower, named in 1951. 410 of these were built, and they did survive quite well, working extensively. 2 locomotives have been preserved. The model does include a number of detail parts here for the user to fit, and these are actually, it's nice to see, these have been weathered as well on this weathered edition, so they don't look stark when you put them on, which is a really nice touch. And we've got the brake rigging there for both tender and locomotive, and then we've also got vacuum standards and the drain cock tubes as well. Bear in mind that if you are running some quite tight radius curves, you can't fit those because it will interfere with the swing on the front bogie. But the brake rigging, you can always fit that on, and certainly it's relatively easy to do. Now, one of the things I do like about these is that the locomotive and the tender are actually separate from each other, and because it's got that DCC socket in the locomotive, it doesn't need any wires going across, and that can mean that these are a lot easier for handling. Now, looking at the tender, there are some improvements here over the earlier examples. We've now got the coupling is in a NEM pocket. This makes changing these out for anything that you want really, really simple. And the actual NEM pocket itself is quite unobtrusive, hidden away back here. It's factory fitted with the slimline tension locks. We do have sprung buffers, and the drawbar is fitted to the locomotive. It's a metal drawbar, and that goes through the front and hooks over on there. Now, I do want to show you, I've actually got a B1 already in my collection, and this is 61250 with the BR Early Crest, and this is a Harold Bibby. But this is also a DCC ready version, so it's the newer chassis, but just in case you're wondering, they have upgraded from this kind of plastic spigot, so we do have a much better locomotive to tender drawbar affair, which is quite good to see that a number of minor details have happened since, and you can also see that there are differences available in tenders. So this has got the actual water dome at the back, quite visible, and the divide for the coal there, you can see, is moved slightly forward, whereas on this particular one it's further back. So there is some variety that can be had for your fleet. The wheels on the tender, really nice and free running, and these have been thoroughly weathered, so there's no weird marks, so I can only conclude these were either weathered out of the model or these have been rotated whilst it's being weathered. And certainly the factory weathering is quite a light weathering. It's not a filthy model. It can provide a really good basis if you want to carry on with the weathering, but it just tones down the paintwork, and I do quite like this finish. It's kind of a in-service, looked after, but maybe had a couple of runs out on the main line, so we've got this coating of coal dust and brake dust. The detail on the front part of the tender there, we've got separately fitted brake standards on either side, but there's no extra picking out in terms of colouring, and this does look to be in the main a one-piece moulding on there, but it is still quite crisp and sharp. Now the coal load is an area where I do feel that this could be improved. The actual rendition of the coal does look a little bit without definition. It's hard to kind of put my finger on it, but what I am going to do is just see if this can be removed. Sometimes with these, the best thing to do is to look to remove the coal load and actually replace with real coal, but that does seem to be well in there. I'm not actually 100% sure if the coal load comes out. It is making noises that suggest it might do, but I can't seem to get that out, so I'm going to leave that be for now. The rest of the tender, there is a reasonable amount of weight to this. It will hold the track pretty well, but there is nothing inside. We do have the water trough scoop representation underneath. You can see that from the side. And there's quite a lot of rivet detail here. The brakes and the springs are really quite nicely done, still really quite crisp and sharp on this tooling. Looking to the locomotive itself, we've got that characteristic Thomson high level boiler on here. It does sit very, very high. It was a trademark of this kind of design, and it is really nicely realised. It captures the look of this B1 really, really well. It was always a great model in Bachmann's range, and certainly even going back to the days of the split chassis version. I had Roe Deer, and I must admit I only got rid of it because I started going DCC, and the problem was that the split chassis, you cannot easily DCC fit those. So it was most welcome when Bachmann brought out this all new chassis. On this chassis we've got the centrally sprung front bogie, and there's a lot of vertical movement on this, which does mean that it holds the track really, really well. The crosshead there is, and the slide as well, that's all metal. Really nicely done. We've got a lot of fluting where it needs to be on the connecting rods. The well shuts gear as well. Really quite well done. It's chemically blackened, but not so black as to look a bit weird. And certainly that does look really, really nice. We've also not got any overspray or clean marks where the side rods have been when it's been weathered. So it is a good weathering job. It's been done pretty competently at the factory, so we don't have the mark where the rods were resting when it was sprayed up. I really do like these riveted weights as well on the wheels. And we've also got the larger weight counterbalancing here on the middle axle, which is where the connecting rods go to. And of course these are counterbalancing the swung weight, so that is perfectly accurate. We've got two different types of wheels, just like on the prototype. So that is, again, another subtle thing that corners could have been cut but have not. The sand boxes are down here at the back, and these sand pipes are made of quite springy metal. They come down to exactly the right point. We've also got some others here which go hidden away. through and are just fitted in there underneath. In terms of pickups, we've got wiper pickups pressed to the back of the wheels on all 6 of the driving wheels, and just moving these from side to side. These are all making full contact for the full swing of movement, which is actually really good to see. Sometimes you do have to just make sure that these are pressing on the backs of the wheels, but from the factory this model is perfectly set up, which should help its running no end. The front face of the locomotive is realised well. We've got the 61076 number across the front of the smoke box, and the dishing on that smoke box is really well done. It's got exactly the shape that it needs to with these integral hinges, and we don't have any of the gimmicky opening fronts on this. Handrails are metal, as is the lamp iron bracket on the front. We've also got a shed code of 64A, which is just visible there. And again, we've got plenty of rivet detail on this buffer beam. And we've also got these radius flares at either side, just as per the prototype. Front buffers are sprung, and we do get the hook factory fitted with additional, these feel like they are metal, so I'd say etched brass pieces that have been added in at the factory. We've also got some additional printing, so we've got this diamond shaped works plate down there, and I can just about make out the writing and the numbers on there. That is really quite nice and crisply done, so it is great to see. The front steps are actually far enough forward that they don't impinge on the full movement of the bogie, so these are actually factory fitted, which is a nice touch. The lining, where we've got this red and this sort of off-white, is really nice, crisp and sharp, follows the full running plate, and then the radius at the cab, and the cab side panels as well also have that same 2-colour approach to the lining. The lining itself on the cylinders, that's just the double lines of the red. And the cylinders too, we've got the representation of the bands that held the metalwork over the top of the cylinder casting. They are all in place. And the front of both of the cylinders and also the valve chest are really nicely done. There's some really quite subtle rivet detail on there as well. And then we've also got this plate with its 3 bolts. And looking further up, we've got, it's almost like an oil bath or something, this kind of strange bracket. Again, another characteristic of the B1 is captured well. Above the running plate, there's a lot going on here. We've got the blast pipes, you can just see there, with the riveting onto the smoke box, and then a whole host of extra detail. Now, quite a lot of it appears to be moulded, but it's really crisp and sharp. And I'm a big advocate that if it doesn't have to be separately fitted parts, then why make them separately fitted if it just adds to the cost? The reversing lever coming down here goes into, it's almost like a folded and contoured piece of metal. It's quite a complex shape, and again, that has been realised really well. Boiler banding, we've got again those 2 lines of red. They go exactly where they need to. There's they're bang on, the boiler bands. There's no movement to that. It's straight true. And as we roll the model over, you can see that there's no gaps. There doesn't seem to be any issues that I can see in terms of the demarcation of those bands. Looking down the other side, we've got the washout plugs. Looking along the top of the boiler, the parting line from the mould is pretty invisible until you get down here. There's a slight trace of it coming to where the dome is, but it's not too bad. The dome is exactly as it needs to be, and then moving on to the smoke box, we've got the rings of rivets, and I do like the funnel on here as well. We've got quite a good space down there. You can actually see all the way through, And it'd be interesting to see when I open it up. I have a feeling that that's where the DCC decoder goes. So certainly we'll look into that and just see what room there is in there, with a view to whether a stay alive and a sound installation would be feasible and possible. The safety valves look and feel to be turned metal, and then again we've got, I think it's a metal whistle behind. There's actually quite a lot of detail to that. And then the front of the cab has these characteristic shaped windows in it, and the glazing, certainly from the outside, looks nice and flush. Looking further around, we've got metal handrails. The side windows, the front ones of these are flush glazed to an extent. Actually, no, just tilting that to its side, you can see there is quite a recess on that glazing. No glazing in the rearmost. And when we turn around to enter the cab, you can see that there is a legacy of this being older tooling. None of the backhead detail is picked out on there, which is a bit of a shame, because some of the later models, it does go a long way picking out some of this pipework. And one of the things that I would suggest that would probably improve this quite a lot is very, very careful application with a tiny paintbrush, with maybe copper-coloured paint on some of the pipework, and some of the brass wheels as well. There is a representation of gauges up there, but it's actually moulded into the glazing bar, and you can see there that does go all the way around and then to those side windows. We do get the LNER bucket seats, and then looking to the cab roof, rain strips either side, they are quite pronounced. And we've got additional rivet details. You can see the panel design of this roof. And there is a hatch there. This is just a representation. It doesn't open, although on the real locomotives it would. I'm going to bring out the second model here. So this is 31-717. This is the B1 as number 1264 in that LNER Lined Green. And for me, this really is an eye candy version. Once again, we've got all those separately fitted parts that can be applied by the user. These are not weathered, and that's what you would expect because this is not a weathered model. With this one, we've got the slightly longer coal load going on here. I just want to see if these, I think these coal loads may come out, but I'm not 100% sure. Certainly they are very well in, and it is one area where I would recommend a dusting of real crushed coal dust would go a long way just to tone that down, or indeed even some weathering powders to create a slightly more matte finish might be a good thing to do with this. The coal load is probably the weakest point of the model. With this, we've got the same design of tender by the looks of it as that other model that I've got. It is interesting, you can see how much this extra livery application really does improve this. And ironically, this enhanced livery application is slightly less money because it's not got the factory weathering. The factory weathering always does seem to get the premium. The frames on the tender have this additional red lining, which really does bring it out, emphasises some of the cutouts and the axle boxes. We've got a crisp and clean LNER, and the white lining around there, really nicely done. Again, we don't have any additional printing on the inside of the tender front, metal handrails, and certainly that does look the part. Moving on to the locomotive, the livery application here really does make this pop. The wheels are correctly fitted out in the green with the white lining, and that does look pretty nice and straight and true. I have seen on some locomotives in the past the white line doesn't quite line up, and what you find is when it runs it looks like the wheel is wobbling, but these do look as though they've got it perfectly on the rim there, and you can see how that really does bring this alive. We've got the red outline on the cylinders, which does actually make them look smaller than on the BR version, and it just goes to show what different lining can really change how the same physical object can look. The application of the green up on top is really nicely done. Lining is again crisp and exactly where it needs to be. Running number 1264 on there, and we've got that plate down below. Just double check on there. No, we don't have the plate. We've just got the 5MT and the 61076 and the route availability number 5. It is interesting though, we've also got some additional parts here which are unique to the BR version, which are not replicated on the LNER version, and it's some of the little points there, the little attentions to detail, which really do make this model come alive when you know the differences between the locomotives throughout their lives. The fact that Bachmann have made it possible with this tooling just to get some of the subtle detail differences, really quite nice. The glazing in the cab is probably another weak point. We've got that recessed glazing from the side, which is a shame. The front glazing is quite nice. It does work quite well, and enhanced with that kind of brass colour just around the edges there. And I'm just going to compare the boiler there. I think they are identical. There's not that much else in the way of detail differences, but definitely this is a pretty good model for the money. We've got again the 6-wheel pickup, and those pickups are, oh, I can just see that one is not quite touching on the extremity, so that is something that I'm going to just need to perhaps address, but the others are all where they need to be. Running on DC, the models actually perform really well straight out of the box, and despite there being one of the pickups on the LNER Green example being not quite touching the wheel when it's pushed all the way to one side, I didn't see any jittery issues out of the box on my DC test track. I did take this opportunity to measure the pulling power of the locomotive on the DC test track, and it did produce a 30 to 32 gram pull on straight and level track, just letting the locomotive lose traction and just seeing where the spring balance got to. So we're going to be able to do this on future reviews as well, and it'll be interesting to start to compare various locomotives. But the B1 is the first on trial, and 30 to 31 grams is what it seems capable of exerting at the drawbar. So we turn now to DCC Fitting, and I'm going to be using the Trainomatic 8-pin decoder, and these are available through the web address in the description box. It's a really easy fit with these models, and even though the decoder socket is in the locomotive, it is a really straightforward one to do for yourself. There's a single screw here at the back, which coincidentally also holds the drawbar in place. You'll need a crosshead screwdriver of the jeweler's variety, just to undo that screw, carefully take it out, and then do take note about the drawbar. You can see here, as we lift the chassis free, that does come out. And we have two different sized holes, and it's the larger hole which goes into the locomotive end, so just keep that in mind for when we come to reassemble this. Lifting the back of the chassis up thus, you can then draw the front of the model clear of where it hooks in, and we are now fully into the model. Looking in here, we've got a motor fitted in the back, transmission in the middle. There's actually plenty of metal in this chassis, which does mean that we've got some good adhesive weight onto those 6 driving wheels. And with the sprung front bogie, then we don't have to really worry about that coming clear of the track. I should also point out at this stage that you can get a good look here at the front bogie. We've got an integral NEM pocket for the slimline tension lock. You can remove that if you don't want the front coupling, but what it actually slots into does remain on the model, so you can just see that there. But we're here for the DCC fit. You can see the 8-pin socket. We're just going to very carefully prise that up enough that I can get a fingernail underneath rock that free. I'm going to get the 8-pin decoder. Now, one of the things that I do like to do is we do have an extra wire here for an extra auxiliary function. It comes pre-tinned, but I just cut the end off because we're not going to use that, and it just means we don't have bare metal in the model in case we accidentally activate one of the auxiliary functions which leads to that wire. I don't think it would be a problem, but better safe than sorry. Pin 1 is up here at the front of the locomotive, front left, and that coincides with the orange wire. Line that up quite carefully, don't force it, and then just gently rock that down and into place, and you'll feel it go all the way home, and there won't be any pins sticking out. For tidying this up, I like to twist up the wires, just makes them quite nice and neat, and then I actually feed the decoder through here, and that then enables me to very carefully wrap the spare wire around. This extra purple wire, I like to keep it handy in case for whatever reason I need that auxiliary function in the future. So I tuck that wire in there, and then the decoder just neatly sits on top. Now, if you're worried about that breaking free, making a bit of a nuisance of itself when you're trying to get the body back on, I've got some Captain tape here. I'm just going to very quickly and easily just peel a small amount off. You don't need to cocoon this thing in tape, you just need enough to hold this in place. So I'm going to put a bit there. I'm actually going to try and get the extra purple wire just under there as well, and down onto the decoder, and there we have it. It's all nicely in place, and that's not going to move about when we're trying to get the body back on. Just be a bit careful of these sandpipes. They can be easily damaged if you're not careful, and what we're going to do is get the chassis in between them, and we're looking at the front there. If I move the front bogie out of the way, that hooks in, you can just see it there. And then before you try and just push this down, just make sure that these wires are not getting caught. You can see there they kind of bunch out just a little tiny bit. So I'm just trying to make sure that they go in without getting caught and cause mystery shorts or intermittent power getting through. So that's now down and in, quite happy with that, no sign of wires being trapped. Now you remember what I said, the larger end of this, we're going through the drawbar hole, and then just lift the chassis up slightly and you'll feel like a notch you can just get that onto. Single screw down and in, and that's going through the middle of that hole. Screw it down, don't over tighten it, just until you feel some resistance. Don't over torque it, and then you can see we've got everything back together and your locomotive is DCC fitted. It doesn't look like there's enough space in there for a particularly big stay alive if you want to fit that, and in terms of a sound installation you're going to have to get creative in terms of locating the speaker. But there you have it, fully DCC fitted. So we're off to the test track where we can just check out the DCC installation, make sure that there's nothing wrong with the decoder. It will be set out of the box to ID address number 3, and we can change that to whatever works best for us. When it came time to run the models on Weir Yard, The performance was reasonably good. They got through all of the point work with no problems whatsoever, and there was no jitteriness. Even though we've only got pickups from 6 driving wheels, this didn't seem to be an issue, and I didn't really feel that these models would have benefited particularly from the addition of a stay alive, and that is a pretty good performance from just those 6 wheels. If you are bothered about pickups, you can always add in a small stay alive or add pickups to the tender, but quite frankly, I don't feel that that was absolutely necessary. When it came to haulage power, I have to say that it wasn't as good a performer as we've seen more recently tooled models, which do seem to have a better balance. It didn't look like it was unbalanced on the track, but I had it mated with 4 of the Hornby Gresley coaches, and whilst it pulled these round no problems, taking in the gradients with no sign of slippage, when I added a 5th coach, I did find that the model slipped to a halt on some of the steepest of the gradients. All in all, it was a reasonable performance, and certainly this seems to be a nice solid well-built locomotive that will provide ample performance on the average modeller's railway. So we turn now to the scores, and first up is build quality, and certainly these do seem to be a nice, rugged, well put together model. The only areas for concern, and it is a minor concern, are the recess on the windows on the cab on the sides does seem to be quite far back, and it is a little bit of a shame. We also have no tender pickups, but that is something that is quite common for locomotives tooled in the period that this comes from, and the performance on the track really did show that it wasn't strictly necessary. A lot of the detail on the side of the running plate is moulded on, but actually is really quite well realised. And the only other area where I did feel that the model was just a little bit marred is this plastic coal insert that doesn't really quite feel real, and I couldn't find a way of removing it, but certainly it's an area where I think the model would be much improved for a dusting of coal, so I'm going to give this a 9.1. On running qualities, the model did perform reasonably well. It didn't seem to need anything in the way of stay alive or tender pickups, and certainly on wear yard it really wasn't jittery at all and got through all of the point work, including Insulfrog. Where it did struggle a little bit was on some of the gradients, and tasked with 4 coaches it was absolutely fine with no signs of slipping, but 5 coaches proved just a little bit too much, and that did seem to be markedly less than what similar locomotives would be able to pull, but 4 coaches is still a reasonable train for the average modeller. I'm going to give this an 8.2. On DCC Fitting and Innovation, well, on DCC Fitting it is really easy to get inside the model. There's no detail to remove, just a single screw and you can slide everything out. But there isn't a lot of space in there for the decoder. The Trainomatic one that I used did fit just fine, but there isn't really a lot of space for anything else, and you can see why tender sockets with the additional space that they provide are certainly the way to go for more modern models, and it is a shame that it will make this quite a difficult prospect for sound fitting. So I'm going to give this a 7.5. On accuracy and quality of finish, well, accuracy, it does seem a pretty reasonable model of the B1. Some areas are showing the age of the tooling just a little bit, and for me, some of the parting lines just around the dome, along the top of the boiler, they're not painfully obvious, but they were detectable in places. It also has to be said that the inside of the cab, the back head, really did seem to be an area that this model would be hugely improved for an additional level of printing to pick out the pipework and some of the wheels and the gauges in there, and it would be a simple way for Bachmann to bring the quality of this model really up to date. All in all, it is a pretty reasonable finish with a really nice factory weathering. The crispness of the lining is really well done, and certainly nothing seems to be out of line on the entirety of either of these models, and I'm going to give it an 8.0. On value for money, That's somewhere where the current sale deal really does make these models an attractive proposition. With their original RRP, I do feel that they were getting a little bit expensive, but in the sale, it brings them down to probably the price point that they should be at, given the age of the tooling, and it's certainly a well worth exploring some of these bargains that can be had, and the B1 is definitely one to consider adding to your collection at the current price point. It's unlikely to be reissued again at that kind of price level, and with all the clamouring for lots of whiz-bangs, bells and whistles, I have to say that I don't really see the B1 from Bachmann being a likely contender for another release anytime soon. So it's a case of get them while you can. And I'm going to give it a 9.0. And that gives us a final score of 41.8. Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's video, and it's certainly been great to have your company as we took a look at this pair of B1s that TMC very kindly loaned to the channel so we could get a closer look. And I'd really love to hear from you guys. Just what do you think about these models? Particularly if you've already got maybe one of the Bachmann B1s from this current batch. How do you find it? What do you think of it? And what would be your recommendation to your fellow modeler? Or maybe this is something that you really do like the look of, and you're already now beating a path to that link that we got in the description box to take a look and see what is available. Do leave a comment down below. It's always great to hear from you, and share your experience with your fellow modeler to help them out. Also, please hit that like button, share this video and subscribe to the channel to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take really good care of yourself, and hopefully I'll see you here next time. Until then, happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Tramfabriek, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest logo.
I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.